start here, John. Like, for people that have been following the Timberwolves sale, the name Alex Rodriguez kind of came out of nowhere. Take us through kind of where this offer came from and what you know about A-Rod getting involved.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Chris, I've been following this Timberwolves sale for years. Glenn Taylor's been looking for a successor for a long, long time. And even for me, it came out of nowhere. So really, he has had several occasions over the last 5-6 years where he's sort of flirted with other possible groups to come in and kind of take things over eventually from him. Could never get a deal done or an agreement in place. And then this last week, all of a sudden, sort of out of nowhere, come Alex Rodriguez and Mark Lore. They get interested. They tried to buy the Mets last year. It didn't quite work out for them. And they got connected to Glenn Taylor as his search for a successor was dragging on. They got with him and met with him last week. And with one meeting on Monday and then another meeting on Saturday, the ball just really got rolling very quickly. If you guys know Glenn Taylor at all, he is a billionaire, but he really wants more than anything to have personal connections with the people he does business with. And Alex Rodriguez and Mark Lore really kind of did a good job of showing that this was more than just a business transaction to them. And I think that he really appreciated that. They had a very intimate gatherings this last week to hash things out. There's still some I's to be dotted, some T's to be crossed. They're in this negotiating period right now, but all of the big things have been agreed upon. The price, keeping the thing in Minnesota, like all these other things that have to happen. And so now they're progressing toward really finalizing this thing, and everyone's operating under the assumption that it's going to happen.
So John, let's assume that it actually does happen. And as I understand it from reading your stuff, it's going to be a couple of years before A-Rod and his partner are actually in control. Glenn Taylor will kind of slowly hand this off over a couple of years. So we may not see the impact immediately, whatever that impact might be. So I'm going to ask you the impossible question, because of course this is just now happening. And to my knowledge, no one's even really been able to speak with A-Rod and his partner about what they might do. Do we have any sense of what a shift in ownership might mean after obviously a very long run by Glenn Taylor? Because this franchise has had more bad years than good. If not for the existence of Kevin Garnett, it's pretty desolate. And so if there's going to be a new direction charted, do we have any sense of what that might be, or what new ownership and new energy might do for this franchise?
Yeah, I think like that's what it is. It's kind of new energy is what has to happen here, Howard. Glenn Taylor has been the owner of this team since 1994, and what you can say about the Timberwolves is they really much have been run like a mom and pop shop. Glenn Taylor is a small town guy. He kind of likes to have a family atmosphere. It's definitely different from many NBA organizations out there. And so I think the idea is that A-Rod and Lore come in as more kind of modern business savvy, marketing, savvy kinds of people with, A-Rod's background in sports, Mark Lore's background in e-commerce and all of those things. And they really want to try and bring things kind of, light years ahead, if I can use the Warriors term, and try and catch up a little bit, because they have been light years behind in many respects. And so you hit it on the head. They're going to come in and be limited partners for the first 2 years, but I still think they're going to have a huge influence early on in this process and trying to modernize and trying to get things going. Now, what we don't know are the changes that they have planned. Are they going to be good? Are they going to be bad? How are they going to be as owners? You just don't know what's going to happen until they step into that seat. But what you can say is it's going to be a markedly different Timberwolves feel with these guys there to kind of push the ball forward. They have a reputation as being a little bit of penny pinchers. They've had a reputation of just kind of, being a little behind the times. And I think these guys are supposed to come in and really try to catch them up in that regard.
Let me ask you this, because you said the team will be staying in Minnesota, and I read some comments from Glenn Taylor in the last couple of days to that effect as well. Glenn's insisted, as you well know, that whoever buys the team keeps the team in Minnesota. We all know A-Rod's connection to Seattle. We know Seattle wants an NBA team. I mean, to your understanding, John, how enforceable is any of that? Hypothetically, like if Minnesota was invaded by Canada, you could move the team out. Like, I'm just like, there's some things that come up that, make it unrealistic to keep a team in a particular city. I mean, how enforceable is any language that gets included in a contract about keeping that team in Minnesota?
Well, I think that, Seattle fans will tell you, don't believe what you hear, right? I mean, I think that Glenn Taylor can say all he wants about the team is going to stay here. When we hear from Alex Rodriguez and Mark Lori, they can say all they want. Yeah, we're going to keep it here. There could be language in any contract that says keep the team here. But if you talk to legal experts about that, there's ways around all of this stuff. Things can change. You can backtrack. You can just straight up just decide to change your mind. Maybe they can't get anything done with the arena and things like that happen. So I would say for fans who are skeptical about the Wolves' long-term future here, I understand that. I think that is, it's not Kevin Garnett buying the team. There's no local ties for Alex Rodriguez and for Mark Lori. The one thing, though, that I would say that I think is more of a positive for Wolves fans who are nervous than any public statements or any contract language that's going to happen. If you talk to people around the league, there is definitely much more of an appetite to expand to Seattle, to Las Vegas, things like that, because owners have lost a ton of money over the last year. How do you recoup that with a $2.5 billion expansion fee in a city rather than maybe charging the Wolves $600-700 million to move? And so, the other thing is that I think the league looks at the Twin Cities. It's the 13th largest market in the league. It's not Memphis. It's not Oklahoma City. It's not a really small market. I think that they see an opportunity here to do well if you can put a winning product on the court. Like, that's the whole problem here has not been the market. It's not been the lack of basketball fans here. There's a huge amount of basketball fans in the Minneapolis area, but it's just the team has been so bad for so long that the interest has waned. And so the idea is that if A-Rod and Lori come in and they make some changes and they get aggressive spending money and infusing this team with capital, that the team will get better and better and be more competitive and be in the playoff hunt. And then the fans will come back and then the momentum will build and there will be no real reason to move. And once the team expands to Seattle and Vegas, are you going to move the Timberwolves to Pittsburgh or to Louisville? Like, I think that's less likely than having that Seattle carrot out there to dangle.
Yeah, it's interesting, John, because, expansion is one of those things that comes up all the time. The league has constantly kind of batted it away. Like, yeah, that's just not something we're going to discuss. And then Adam Silver kind of left the door open within the last few months. And I think you noted that in your latest story, which was interesting because even rhetorically, the fact that he allowed for the possibility of it in the near future-ish was interesting. Chris and I both believe expansion is a terrible idea for the product. Not that the league will care what we think. I think it's going to dilute the talent pool even further. I think it's a terrible idea. I think if Seattle's going to get a team, it should be by relocation, even though I'm not advocating for anybody to lose their team. But let me just ask this question. Everything that you laid out is kind of this leap of faith. Well, okay, new ownership, new energy, better product, the fans will return, everything's fine, there'll be no reason to go. But as of right now, and you're right to point out too, of course, that Seattle's not that much bigger of a market. It's like, 2 slots ahead of them on the Nielsen rankings. But we know there's a passionate fan base in Seattle that badly wants basketball back, that supported the Sonics greatly. And we know that the Timberwolves, for most of the last 15 years, it's as far back as I went, all but one of those 15 years, they were in the bottom third in attendance, and not just by number, but by percentage of building, percentage of occupancy. So it seems to me there's at least a legit concern and maybe even a legit premise to say, maybe we need to re-examine the market for the Timberwolves here. How do we know that just putting a better product out there is going to bring them all back. What's wrong with my line of reasoning there? And is there an opening possibly? And I'm not advocating it, just saying we got to all be realists here. We've seen this stuff happen before.
Yeah, I think that one thing that I was careful to write in the story as well is like there's no guarantee that this is going to happen, like that everything is going to work out well for the Timberwolves. Chances are it's the Timberwolves, things don't work out well for them, right? Like this is just the way that things have gone. And, I think that until Mark Lowry and A-Rod preside over the building of a new arena in Minneapolis or like a $500 million renovation of the Target Center or whatever like that, that's a huge, strong statement to kind of really cement this team in this market. Yeah, that's going to hang out there. And I think it's not a guarantee. You can't guarantee anything is I guess what I would say in terms of my caveat, that the Wolves will definitely not move. In terms of your argument, you're right. The building has been empty. Now, here's what I've always said. Like, it's one thing if your team has been successful for a while and then they go through a couple of down years in rebuilding and you just see everyone jump off of the bandwagon and not come back. That's where you could say, okay, fair weather fans, not much of a market. And even when they're winning, the building is not packed. This market has been dormant for literally 15 straight years. Like, that's a long time. You had the 1 year with Tom Thibodeau and Jimmy Butler where they made the playoffs, and then it blew up in a spectacular fashion to like really erode any confidence in the franchise at all locally. So these fans have been kicked in the teeth every single year forever and ever. This isn't just a little swoon. This isn't just a down cycle. This is an entire generation of basketball fans who don't know what relevant basketball is. And so in the anecdotal evidence I can provide, last year when the Wolves traded for D'Angelo Russell, they were at the bottom of the league in attendance leading right up to that trade. They had some terrible losses right before that, and immediately after, 4 straight sellouts. So there's just like, I use that as just a small sample of an appetite for the game here. I think that the fans are just need and are desperate for a reason to come out and believe in a franchise that has given them no reason to believe. Now, here's where the problem will come in. Let's say that A-Rod and Mark Lowry get here and they look around and they say, look, Target Center, second oldest building in the league. It's really a dump. We're going to need a new facility and we're going to need the public to pay for it. That's going to be where you could hit a real problem. And because the Timberwolves do not have any credibility locally, there's already been a ton of public money spent on arenas for other teams around this city. And that's where you could get some sort of a standoff. And so that's what you'll have to watch closely. But as far as I've always been kind of a defender of the basketball fan in the Twin Cities, just because they have endured much more than anyone else. Because we're not even talking losing seasons, guys. We're talking 60 loss seasons. We're talking Johnny Flynn over Steph Curry. We're talking Jimmy Butler blowing the team up right before training camp. We're talking every imaginable dysfunction. We're talking about losing coaches to cancer. We're like everything you can think of, these fans have had to endure. And at every step of the way, they've been told, do not pay attention to the Timberwolves. We're not worth it. Alex Rodriguez and Mark Lowry coming in are trying to reimagine what this brand is and see if they will start paying attention. We'll see if that happens or not.
Who could forget the David Kahn era in Minnesota?
I've tried, Chris.
Give it your best shot. Before we let you go, John, one question. Glenn Taylor has owned this team since 1994. He oversaw the Kevin Garnett era in Minnesota, which had a level of success. He then proceeded to alienate Kevin Garnett, which is unforgettable. He may be unforgivable in the Minnesota area. What is Glenn Taylor's legacy going to be once he sells this team?
Well, I mean, yeah, on the plus side, he is the one that saved this team from moving to New Orleans in 1994. They were gone. It was going to happen. He swooped in. David Stern blocked the move, but then Glenn Taylor came in out of nowhere, just like A-Rod and Mark Lowry, and bought the team and kept it here. So at the very base level, the reason the Timberwolves are here is because of Glenn Taylor. The reason the Timberwolves are bad is a lot because of Glenn Taylor as well. And so I think that a lot of fans have been clamoring for years for Glenn to move on and to hand the team over to some new ownership that will have fresh perspective, that will get aggressive with spending and try and get the team back competitive. I think in some ways, his complete legacy will really be tied to what happens here over the next 5 or 6 years. If A-Rod and Laurie come in and they really stabilize the franchise and they energize it and they make the right moves and they return it to respectability and it remains in town for a long, long time, that really improves Glenn Taylor's legacy. If they turn into carpetbaggers, if they try and, steal them out from under this community and take them to Seattle or to wherever else, then, I think his name is going to be mud in the eyes of basketball fans. So it's a complicated legacy, but I think it's still left to be written in some ways.
Well, John, we appreciate it. Look forward to you developing a cozy relationship with A-Rod for years to come.
We have a lot in common.
And J-Lo, of course.
Yes, of course.
Oh, they're on the outs though, right? Am I reading my TMZ correctly? Like J-Lo and
say it isn't so.
I'm holding out for love, guys. I'm gonna think it's gonna conquer all, and everything's gonna be okay.
I'm just gonna assume all those John Krawczynski stories in The Athletic have like source close to A-Rod is actually A-Rod. He's developing this text me all the time, buddy, kind of relationship. That would
little by little, guys.
John, we appreciate it. Great stuff, man. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Gallus.
Thanks, John.